Hey guys, this is Daniel from Northwild Design, and I just want to show you guys how to use my Cast Iron Grunge Pack set in Affinity Designer. I had a previous video that showed how to use the brushes, overlays in Photoshop to create some weathering and aging on typography, so you can check that out. There's a link to that video in the description. But if you are mostly using Affinity Designer to create your artwork and designs, then this video is for you. So let's get right to it. I'm just going to open up this promo picture that I created for the pack. If you are familiar with the pack and have seen it on one of the places where it's being sold at right now, you would have noticed that this image doesn't have any of the distressing or grunge that was added before. So it's pretty clean vectors right now with just the rocket ship and the moon and the fire trail. But let's go ahead and load in the brushes, and I'll show you how to add some weathering and texture to this artwork. So first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you're in the Pixel Persona tab. So make sure that's clicked, and then come over here to the Brushes tab, and then where you see these little dashes, that'll bring up the sub menu, and you'll want to go into Import Brushes. Now I've already imported the brushes into Affinity Designer, but what you'll want to do is, after you've unzipped your file, you'll have a couple of folders to choose from, and one of these is going to be the Affinity Brushes folder. So you'll just click on that and you'll have two options here. We'll talk about the vector edge brushes later in this video, but for now you'll want to pick Cast Iron Grunge Brushes. So you'll double click that, and then they'll come up in this drop down. So now that I have the brushes loaded, there's 18 brushes, and they range from subtle textures to more extreme weathering and distressing textures. So let's go ahead and pick this first one here. And how I typically use these brushes is that I use them to add shadows and some grudge along the edges of things like the spaceship or the moon. So right now I'll just give you a little demonstration of how to do that, and the best way to do it with vector. Because we are in Pixel Persona, all of this that's going to be created will be raster bitmap layers rather than vector layers. The cool thing about Affinity Designer is that we can go in and kind of mix the two by creating a pixel layer. So we'll create a pixel layer, and then we can drag and drop a pixel layer into one of these objects, and then we'll be able to paint inside the object. So it'll create a clipping mask that will restrict where the brush's texture is showing on the object. So right now we have this pixel layer above everything, and so if we were to start painting with brush, it would just go everywhere. And that's fine if you want to do that, but I'm going to assume that most of you will want to just kind of create something more subtle and distinctive. So I'm going to take this pixel brush, or this pixel layer, and I'm going to drag it all the way down to this moon object here. So what this will do is it'll allow me to add the texture only to the moon, and as you can see by the preview, we'll zoom in so you can see that the preview is only showing on the moon, it's not overlapping onto the background. So with these brushes, typically I'll just do a few clicks here and there, and then we add a bit of texture. And to kind of blend that better, because you can kind of see how it's got that circular bit to it, we can pick a more subtle texture like this one. Well, this one, it's got some hard edges to it, so let's go down. So we've got one like this, and this one we can hold and just blur those edges a bit. So you can see that it's creating a smoother transition between the brush strokes. And it just gives it a really nice texture that would otherwise not be there. You can alternatively click on that layer and we can turn the opacity down. There's a bit of lag here with my screen sharing software and Affinity, so I apologize for that. If you turn it down, it's a little more subtle. So alternatively, we can go up to the color tab, grab our color picker. Let's get this shadow layer. And now we can add just a few shadows to make it more interesting. So there you can already see that we have given this moon a bit more texture. It's not as clean and kind of bland as it was before, and it helps it stand out just a bit more. And we can do the same thing. All we do is create another pixel layer, and then this rocket ship group has a lot of pieces to it, so I'll have to find the main piece, which I think is that one there. And then what we'll do is I'm going to go back to the color picker. I'm just going to get kind of a darker red tone here. And oh, there we go, there's the body. So we're just going to drag this into this group. Just going to open that. And now you can see that it's only affecting the base of that rocket ship, not the wings or the little window or the bolts. It's just affecting the base because I've dragged that pixel layer underneath this curve layer here, or the rocket itself. So that just creates a nice clipping mask so that when we add our texture, it just stays, well, not completely. I didn't here, this can go under this. There we go. Now it doesn't affect the cone of the ship. And so now we can easily add some weathering to the ship, some texture to the ship. And these brushes are really, like I said, these are high resolution brushes, so they're pretty big when you open them up, but you just use the bracket keys on your keyboard. To the left bracket key will minimize the size and the right one will increase it. And that way we can just have a much smaller brush to work with. And again, you're going to see those round shapes, and to help with that you would just use some of the more subtle brushes to kind of blend in that distressing. Like so. Let me zoom out of that. So now, as you can see, you get just much more interesting effects for your artwork, and it helps it to stand out, especially vector designs, which can sometimes be just too clean and sometimes bland. This will really help it to stand out. So now that I've shown you these bitmap brushes, I want to show you the edge brushes that are also included in this pack. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the draw persona, click over to that, and to import the vector brushes, it's the same process as before, except now these brushes are, and they're just located in this draw persona because they are vector brushes, not bitmap brushes. We'll go to the submenu, import brushes, and now you'll pick the cast iron pan vector edge brushes. So after you've selected those, they will load in, and there are 5 of these, and these are best used for creating paper folds or just lines along your artwork. I wouldn't, again, you can be very creative with them. You can create outlines into your artwork, but Affinity has a kind of quirk where vector brushes don't close around a loop very well. So I'll show you an example of that so it's not confusing. I'm just going to draw a circle here, and I've got some, there we go. So we've got this circle, and I'm going to change the stroke to black just so you can see that better. And let's say we wanted that stroke to be a vector, one of the vector edge brush strokes. This is something you can do. So right now, I'll zoom in, and you'll see that there's a cool little vector effect, but up here it kind of breaks down, and this is because Affinity doesn't close the loop very well, and I think this is something that's being worked on in a future update. So a workaround to fix this, if you're wanting to use these brushes to give kind of this distressing outline, so let's say we're going to select that shape, and right now it's black. Let's say we want to make the color the same, and it's not exactly the same color. Bear with me here. Let's get the color picker out. Let's get that color, and then okay. So now you can kind of see that it just gives us this distressed kind of edge, and you can change the stroke to make it a little more pronounced. And because it's a distressed effect, you can't completely tell that there's a problem with that loop there. But if I pick a different brush, maybe this one, I've got to select the object. So let's pick our stroke. Let's pick a different one. Let's change the size. Well, I apologize, guys. My computer is lagging just a bit because of the screen sharing software. Anyway, we'll move on. If you guys need a tutorial on the textured lines, then please leave a comment and I can get into that. But because of the size of this artwork, it's probably just kind of, I don't want my computer to crash midway through this video. So anyway, vector edge brushes, right. Let's get back to that. I'll delete that. So if we wanted to do a paper fold, in the original promo illustration that I made for this, there was some retro folds along the edges here. These are great for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick the pen tool, and I am going to add a stroke here. And we're going to change that color to something more pick the stroke. We'll do something that's a little more retro, like a tan kind of color. Something like that. And then what I'll do is I'll pick this one, and then we'll increase the stroke just a little bit. So, and actually it'd be better if I extend that out a little. So it just kind of gives it a nice distressed line along the edges. And this works best if there was more. Right now it kind of stands out a little too much, but if you added a lot of distressing to it, it would look much more pronounced and give it that like a nice little fold there, a crease in the drawing, almost like it's on paper. And it also works for, in this design, I've got some of, let's see. In this design, I've got some of the strokes going through here to knock it back to the background. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's say we wanted to show some distressing going through maybe this rocket, the flaring part here, or the rocket boost part. So let's go to this curve here, and I'm going to just add that, and we're going to change the color of this to the color of the background. And just going to see. Oh, that's why we're on glow layer. Okay, so we're going to just had to bring that up. It was looking a little weird. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick our brush. Let's do this one. And we're going to increase the stroke. You can't go too high because these vector brushes, they are based off of raster images or bitmaps, so they're not true vector brushes. Affinity doesn't really have true vector brushes, unfortunately. So you gotta, when they start to kind of look like they're blowing up, that's when you gotta scale it back a little on the sizing. But we'll put that there, and as you can see, when you've layered your art with more distressed design, let's move that. Oop. Let's move it to the more darker part here, to the darker area. It's not the perfect example, but essentially what would happen is that you would have that go right through, and it looks like it's cut out. So there's a distressing that goes there that will help age the work and give it the weathered look that you might want, kind of like this here with the moon. But these vector edges are really nice for that, just to create folds and creases and distressing along edges, specifically hard edges like that. So that's what they're best for. Another tool I want to show you here in Affinity that can be used, that's part of the pack, is the PNG overlays. So with the PNG overlays, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into File and Place, and there'll be a folder in your zip file for PNG overlays, and you'll have 12 of these that will be used, that you can use for your designs. So I'm going to pick number 11, and then you'll get that when your cursor gets the little arrow, that's when you would want to place it. So I'm just going to drag and place this right over, and I'm actually going to rotate it and stretch it out just a little bit so it covers the entire drawing. So as you can see, this gives a lot of grunge, and if you want to change the color here, because this isn't really matching the color we might want, like maybe we want this to be more of this background color. So a way to do that is we would go into the layer. So this is our layer here, and in the Effects tab, go to Color Overlay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to click on this color palette, and you can use the dropper tool here, and we can sample some of the color, and now you get much, it's not a perfect look because the background is, it's a gradient, but you kind of get the idea of what you can do here. So now you see all of that nice subtle texture just bleeding into the image, and it very quickly creates a grungy, distressed design that will look good on artwork, on t-shirt designs. And there's just, as you lay different grunge layers into this, you'll just see how awesome this can look. So that's basically the tutorial for the Cast Iron Grunge Pack for Affinity Designer. It will work the same way with Affinity Photo, except for the vector edge. The vector edge brushes only work in Affinity Designer. I don't have Affinity Photo, so I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure there's no vector tools in that program. But everything else I've shown you here should work with Affinity Photo as well. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this grunge pack. There's a link to it in the description. Thanks so much.